Hi class, this is Melissa, and I'm going to be going through the presentation that Esther and I created about the author Margaret Brown. So Margaret Brown was born on May 23rd, 1910 in Brooklyn, New York. She went to a boarding school in Switzerland while her parents were living in India and Connecticut, and after she graduated, she went to Hollins College in Virginia. There she got her bachelor's in English and went on to become a teacher, and also she studied art on the side. She taught at Bank Street Experimental School in New York, and she died tragically at the young age of 42. Some of her published books include her first published book called When the Wind Blew, which was published in 1937, and some other famous books such as A Runaway Bunny and Goodnight Moon. She had 100 published books. Some of them were published after her death, and she still has some of her writing that hasn't been published yet. Margaret Brown's style. While she was working at the Bank Street Experimental School, she discovered a approach to children's literature and education that the school promoted. This approach emphasized the real world and the here and now, and these concepts emphasized personal responsibility and the individual's experience from the present moment. This philosophy influenced Margaret Brown's work a lot, and she was also inspired by Gertrude Stein, who was a poet and writer in the early 1900s. Some more about Margaret Brown's style. Her books were written through the eyes of children, as many writers and biographers have pointed out, meaning that a lot of her books seem like they're very relatable to children because they're written in the way that a child would think about the world, and this is to help children explore more and understand what they're learning about. Some people say that she was able to achieve this so easily because of her natural childlike personality. A lot of her books also contain a poem-like prose. Though not all of her books are poems, they all contain a certain type of rhythm and rhyme and alliteration that makes the book, makes the words very pleasant to the ear when listening to them. And a lot of her stories were also inspired by nature. When she would be writing, she would expose herself to nature, whether it be picking daisies in her yard or going to sit in an empty field and look at clouds, things like this to help her get into her zone for writing and also to inspire her to think about the world. The three generalizations to describe her work would be family. This would be because a lot of her books were written with the intent of children being able to read it with their family and have open discussions about the work, about the content, about how the story goes. Poetry, as I mentioned earlier, with her poem-like prose, and also bedtime story, because a lot of her books have been used as bedtime stories for generations, including Goodnight Moon, which is a very popular bedtime story. Changing the field. So Margaret Brown was actually considered an early feminist. She really rooted for equality between genders, and she didn't like the gender roles that were going on at the time she was living in. She wanted to go beyond traditional fairy tales and provide children, especially young girls, with different roles for women in books. She thought that a lot of books talked about girls being needed to be saved by men or by princes or things like that for them to be capable, and she wanted to create characters with their own sense of capability and with their own independence and strength. And this was a little controversial at the time because of the strict gender roles in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. Some interesting facts. Brown was actually openly bisexual. She had a lesbian lover for most of her adult life, and she also dated a bunch of men and women throughout her life. She once won the title as the fastest woman in beagling, which I looked it up. It was a sport where people would try to outrun a group of beagles, like the dogs. and she was the fastest woman at the time, and this was a national title. Um, she also spent her first royalty check from her books on a big giant basket of flowers. She used all the money she made from that first check just to buy as many flowers as possible because she loves flowers. And she's also known for her strange childlike behavior. I was reading one story where she decided that she wanted it to be Christmas one day, so she just threw a Christmas party for all her friends and said, "Let's make it Christmas today." And she continued that childlike behavior throughout her whole life, even up until her death. She died suddenly after a knee surgery because she kicked her leg in like a can-can style to show her nurse that she felt better, but this caused a blood clot in her leg that caused her to die suddenly and like instantly. So that was really scary. This is actually a picture of what beagling looks like if you're interested. And just a final quote to end things off. She said that the purpose of children's books were to jog him with the unexpected and comfort him with the familiar. All right, thank you for listening to this presentation. If you have any questions about Margaret Brown, feel free to let us know. All right, thank you.